seriously, it's so hot outside. Please come on in for this edition of the Sportsline Podcast here on CHCH. I'm Bubba O'Neil. Well, as many as you know, sports in Southern Ontario is our focus. And folks, it is hard to argue that the Golden Horseshoe has developed and is the home of outstanding talent. In today's case, this talent is one of the reasons and the inspirations for my career choice. Back in the 1980s, when the CHCH sports department had as many as 5, maybe even 6 individuals doing work on a daily basis, this Barrie native established himself on the beat with the Blue Jays. Daily reports from training camp in Florida were the norm, and game day coverage during the regular season highlighted the summer sports season with Fred Anderton holding the microphone. Years retired, he's busy as the chief executive with videobio.ca. He's married to the most beautiful woman in the world, and he's still watching those Blue Jays, painful as it is, with the Beach Boys playing in the background. Like, this is awesome. Like, I'm having great shows. I've had great guests, and I get to have Fred Anderton here on my podcast to talk about the good old days. And I'm glad you're here, Fred. Thank you.
Well, you know, I have to thank you, Bubba, because I grew up watching CHCH, and Thursday nights was hockey night from the Forum, as you know, and Norm Marshall did the games, and we used to have a rink down the road, a friend of ours. In the wintertime, we'd be out there playing hockey late into the nights because he put up lights and everything. But Thursday night at 7:25, I would leave the ice and I would run up the street with my skates still on, tippy-toeing up, and get home, whip off my skates, run upstairs to the TV just to catch that game at 7:30 with Norm Marshall and the Hamilton Red Wings. So that was really my introduction to CHCH. And then in the morning, we used to get the Globe and Mail, and I'd read Dick Beddoes because he had a sports column with the Globe. And then to get to work with those two giants in the industry. You know, I always often say to my beautiful wife, Mary, I've never worked a day of my life, you know, which was fine when I was employed. It's not so good when you're at home, though, because she expects a little more of me.
Okay, that's sure. Okay. You know, but tell me about those days, and I think I got to go start there. How'd you get into the business? Why did you want to be a sportscaster?
Actually, I graduated from Mac, and I got a job as a chartered accountant because in an office, I wanted to be a chartered accountant. But after 6 months, I decided, you know what, I think I'd like to be a sportscaster. And so I made up a little tape, and we had friends down the street that they had one of these great big giant reel-to-reels, okay? So I did a 3-minute sportscast, and I put it on there. Well, what I didn't know at the time was that machine only worked, the tape only worked on that particular machine. So they said, oh, you have to take the machine with you. They can't just take the tape. So I went up to Barrie and I asked one of the sports guys there, because that was my hometown, as you mentioned, and I said, what do I do to get into the business? He said, quit your job with that chartered accountant firm and just go knock on doors. So I made up that tape. I started knocking on doors. First door I went to, I sat down this thing, you know, sometimes it helps to be naive. I didn't know any better. I just wanted it badly. And I put the tape down and they said, we'll be in touch. And the next day I was going to St. Thomas to apply for a job there in radio. And I got a call before I even got to the station there from the station, the original station I went to in Cambridge. And they said, you're hired. So, I mean, it worked out, you know, but I was very fortunate because I didn't know what I was doing, really.
So radio was the beginning?
Radio was the beginning. I did that for 4 years. And then I got an opportunity. They were looking for people. Global had a thing back then where they got people in local radio stations to go out and do stories. And so I got to do stories in the Cambridge area. It started out and it just spread all over Southern Ontario. And then when CH was looking for people, I took some of the stories I had done at Global, and I wasn't really working for Global. It was just a freelance kind of thing, but they sent out a really good cameraman, a good producer. So that's how I learned the craft, because TV is different than radio, as you know.
Absolutely.
And when I came to CH, Dick Gray was the news director, and he said, Fred, don't have any openings now, but the first one we get, I'm going to call you. And a couple of weeks later, they promoted 3 reporters to be assistant news directors, and that's how I got in the door. So
amazing! It wasn't even a month.
No, everything's just, I don't know, it just fell into place.
Beautiful. I mean, can you describe to our viewers and listeners, obviously here on this podcast, what? And I tried to do a little bit of it. You would know better than I. What was CHCH like back in those days?
Oh, it was amazing. I mean, we had Dick Beddoes and Sherrington, and they would just say whatever they felt was on their mind. They didn't care about anything else. And I remember one night, because Dick had his own show, the Dick Beddoes show, and one night he was going to have Grapes on. So Don Cherry comes over, and we're walking down the hall to the studio, and Grapes hadn't done TV, and so Dick turned to him and he said, "You know what? You've got to be controversial. Here's what I want you to say." And he told him, say this. And Cherry sat back and he goes, "I can't say that. I can't do that." And
he said that?
He said that. He is a really nice man. And he said, but anyway, Beddoes said to him, "If you want to make it in this business, you got to be controversial." And so that's where it all started for Don. And I mean, he was the master of that.
He learned pretty quick, I think. I mean, I remember that punch up in Piastani, if you remember that thing. And then he went wild from there. And then I guess a hockey night in Canada for all those years. And there are people still to this day clamoring for him to come back and have some type of coach's corner. I don't think it's going to happen, but
I don't watch hockey anymore because they fired him.
Wow.
I mean, I watched 2 hockey games since then, and I watched the 3rd period of the Oilers game the other night. But that's all I've watched, and it's only because I thought, what an injustice. That guy, I remember we'd be at Maple Leaf Gardens, and in between periods, you would stand up, and all the guys in the press box would get up, and we'd look to see what Cherry was going to say.
They still do it. Not anymore, but up till when my days going there, absolutely. Which, I stopped going to Leaf games for work purposes, but less than 10 years ago. And that's what everyone did after the first period.
And what a nice man Don Cherry is. I just have so much admiration for him. He told it like it was, and they should have never fired him.
Well, we are in a society sometimes where you just can't say, you can't do exactly that anymore, and that's, I guess, that's kind of the. And if there is anything to say, maybe Don didn't understand that, times did change a little bit, and the things you could say back at that time, you just can't say anymore. I think that's for all of us right now as we grow up. Okay, baseball's your thing. That's your jam. How'd you get into that?
Actually, I was hired for news, and I did that for a few months, and then one night, Dick Beddoes and Stan Keys and I went out after work, and I always talked to Dick about sports. Every day I would talk to him about sports because I love sports, and talk to him about baseball and everything. And so we went out after work, and we were having a coffee, and Dick turned to Stan and said, "On Monday, Fred's going to be in the sports department." He didn't tell me. I didn't know. Anyway, a month later, I was on my way to cover the Blue Jays in spring training. So I thought, wow, this is pretty good. So again, it just fell into place.
And I guess it would have been Dunedin still at that time?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
What was that like? Because, to get at that time, and what era? We're talking about early 1980s at this point, right?
Yeah.
So, to get daily reports from Dunedin, it's not like now, and you just put it up in a thing, or it's there in 6 seconds. It was a whole process back then, right?
Oh, it was brutal. So we couldn't even play back our interviews. So we do the interviews, and but we couldn't see them. We didn't have the technology to do it. So I used to carry a little microphone with me. So we'd be sitting down and interviewing someone, George Bell or whomever, and they would talk, and I'd go back. And Jerry Boylo was a cameraman. We'd go back, and we try to do 3 stories in a day because we had to drive to the airport and then fly back the tape. And I would put notes like, put this shot there, and all. That's how we did it. So there were many nights, because we were trying to do 3 stories early as soon as we got there. I'd work till 7:30, 8:30, 9:30 sometimes at night. Jerry was such a nice guy. He never once said to me, Fred, when are we going for supper? And I still remember that. It was just wonderful.
Yeah, those were unbelievable years for the Blue Jays, where they were, and you got to enjoy championship years.
Well,
best part of it. I'm sure it started out slow, but they just got better. They kept tasting it a little bit.
Yeah. And in '85, they almost got there and didn't make it. Kansas City. Out. Yeah, they brought in
George Brett.
Yeah, I love George Brett.
Oh, he was an amazing ball player.
One of my favorites, and one of the reasons I like him is because he's so honest. Fabulous hitter. But I remember one time he had a bad game, and they had lost a tough one, and George Brett broke up the washroom with his bat in the visitors' clubhouse. And I went the next night and interviewed him, and I asked him about it, and I thought he'd deny it. And he goes, No, I did it. He said, and I'll guarantee you there's 25 guys in that other, pointing to the Blue Jays dugout and clubhouse. He says 25 other guys in that clubhouse would do the same thing if they lost like we did. That's how competitive he was. And you'll remember the pine tar when he ran out on the field just like a madman.
I'm glad you said that. I didn't know. I was thinking of the words to say, because I don't think I've ever seen anyone in sport where a call was made and the explosion of emotion of him running out to I don't know, I can't remember who the Rungy, I can't remember who it was, the ump. Woo, he was hot. He was hot. Yeah. Billy, I guess it would have been, I can't remember who the manager would have been at that time, but couldn't control him. That was a beautiful moment. And it'll go down in history, right?
Oh, yeah.
Him and Nolan Ryan destroying that too. I'll tell you. But yeah, it was a different game at that time.
Yeah.
But let me ask you, again, you have a little prop before I go on to modern day Jays. What's this all about here?
Oh, okay. So the best clip I didn't get. So it was the 92 World Series, and Jack Morris was pitching. And back in those days, if you recall, we had scrums. So World Series, you'd have 25, 35 reporters, like TV, radio, newspapers, and we're in Atlanta, and Jack Morris is pitching, and he loses the game, and Jack was really competitive. So anyway, I happened to be right in front of him, and I said to him, Jack, you were behind in the count, and he gave up a big home run that cost him the game. So I said to him, Jack, you were behind in the count all night long. Did you think it was ever going to catch up to you? And he said, that would be like if you thought I was going to punch you in the face, would you ask another question? And I'm like, and I asked another question. I have no idea what and then I said to our cameraman, let's go. We got the quote of the year. Yeah. So anyway, we go back. We were editing at CNN. So we go back to CNN, and the cameraman puts the tape in, and we look at it. I says, just go right to that clip. That's all we need. We just need that one clip. That's great. So we go. He can't find the clip. He goes, Fred, I wasn't rolling.
No.
Yes. I won't tell you his name because he was such a hardworking guy. Normally I would have been upset, but he was such a hardworking guy and young guy. And I said, okay, let's find the next best clip we've got and go with that. Anyway, when the Blue Jays won the World Series, this cameraman, who will remain unnamed, he climbed up and got me this bunting from the World Series victory in 1982.
Oh,
I remember these. It's got a bit of champagne on it there. You can see, but
nice.
Yeah, that's the story behind that. But
I remember they were all over the stadium. That's right.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But you go back to the early days of the Jays and why they were successful, and it started at the top, right? And they brought in Beeston, started out. I think he was their accountant to begin with, first employee, and he ended up being the president. And then Gillick came in, and
Pat Gillick, yes.
Pat Gillick came in. But before that, Bavasi was the president.
Peter
Bavasi.
Okay.
So Gillick came in, and he said, "Listen, I got a trade worked out with the Yankees," because he had come over from the Yankees. He said, "We're going to get this great young pitcher. Nobody's ever heard of him, Ron Guidry." And he said, "We've got to trade Bill Singer." And Bavasi told me this story, not Gillick. So Bavasi says, "We can't make that deal because everybody knows who Singer is because they had picked him up in the draft from the Dodgers.
Pitched the first game, did he? No?
Yeah. So, and he was the man.
Cool.
And nobody's ever heard of Guidry, so we can't make the trade because Guidry won't sell tickets. And I think that's what really drove Alex Anthopoulos out of Toronto, because when they brought in Shapiro, they put him in charge of baseball. Anything, he was the president, but he also, now Anthopoulos had to report to him. Mm-hmm. This is where everything went downhill, because Anthopoulos was brilliant, but he didn't want to make a trade and then have to go to Shapiro and say, can we make this trade? And then he gets bevasied, so he left. Since he left, he's won 7 championship series. He won the World Series. Atlanta's up here. And these two guys now running the Blue Jays, Shapiro and Atkins, well, they came over from Cleveland. And look where the Guardians are now. They're one of the best teams in baseball, and the Blue Jays are terrible.
And the thing that I was always very curious about, and I think many hardcore Blue Jay fans were like, the Indians were more of a lower budget team.
They were.
And they never really won anything with those guys.
No.
So why were the Blue Jays, a team that were willing and still willing to spend money, bigger market, solo franchise in all of Canada, why were they interested in these sort of guys that, they're in Cleveland. No offense to Cleveland, they're in Cleveland.
You can pin everything on Ed Rogers. Ed Rogers made that decision, and Shapiro had done some nice work on the stadium in Cleveland. And I think that was probably his thinking. Well, they were talking about building a new stadium or staying where they were. And so he brings in Shapiro, and Shapiro has done some things and, make the ballpark a little friendlier. And, you can attract fans that aren't necessarily baseball fans. You watch a broadcast, you've got more reports on the stadium and where you can sit and where you can drink and all this than you do real baseball. So that's annoying for people who love the game, but for the casual fan that maybe doesn't even want to go, even my wife Mary, who's never, I think she's been to one game, wouldn't watch it. But when she was watching it the other night, I said, just watch this for a bit. And she said, you know what, I really like that. I'd like to go there and see that.
Right.
But I think that's the whole problem. These guys were not the right guys, and then he brought in his pal Atkins, and they give away Teoscar Hernandez. Oh. I think they thought at the time the Blue Jays were having a lot of fun. They ended up taking the home run jacket away from them. But you have to have fun, and the Mets right now, they were slumping badly and everything, and Frankie Lindor called a meeting, and J.D. Martinez, the veteran, said, guys, we're not having fun. We've got to have fun. And so that turned them around. They've been playing really well since then. You look at Biggio before he left. He looked like the most unhappy ball player in the world. You see Bichette there now. I didn't even see him in last night's game.
He was injured.
I know he's injured, but
now.
He's sitting there and he just looks so,
Well, I'm concerned right now the way the Blue Jays are losing games right now. They just got coming off a sweep of the Red Sox.
Yeah.
They're first. Amazing, as poor as they've been this season, this is the first time they've been swept all year long. There's a division, and I'm sure it will take some very strong locker room people to make sure that the locker room stays whole.
Right.
But you have got a pitching staff that's working real hard, and they're not great every night, but they're good most nights.
Right.
They're not getting run support.
No. I mean, they can't score even in the first run when your best hitters are up.
What was that, 30 consecutive games where they can't score a run in the first inning? Right? That's a problem. The runners in scoring position, just in last night's game alone, I believe was 1 for 18. They're making errors in the field. 4 of them last night. That's inexcusable. That's high school ball.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're the pitchers and you're working real hard and you can't get a little results on the other side, or just a little, give me a couple of runs to work with. Like, I think eventually you're going to say, and I always remember Donaldson saying one day when the Jays were struggling, this isn't the tri-league. Right,
yeah,
like he
exactly.
He had had enough, right? And whether it was going to drive a stake between the locker room or not, he had to step up and speak up and say something. And I think that's a problem with the Blue Jays right now. Amongst all the other things off the diamond, this is a team that right now, I mean, how did they all of a sudden, Fred, not all that long ago, they were one of the top home run hitting teams in all of baseball. And right now, I think they're ranked 27th or 28th.
Well, it is hard to believe, but I mean, they let Teoscar go, and Swanson's in the minors. That was a terrible deal. And, you know, quite frankly, Vladdy is not the player they thought he was going to be.
Do you think that?
I do.
Is it a long enough time to say that now?
You know, the problem was at the start of the year when he wasn't hitting home runs, they said, oh, they reconfigured the ballpark and the ball's not flying out of here like it used to. Well, then Baltimore comes in the first night, they hit 4 home runs. You know, Boston hits 4 home runs. It's not the ballpark, you know. But I think John Schneider is going to wear it because the first thing they're going to do is fire the manager. It's the guys at the top. They got to, in my opinion, they have to get Shapiro and Atkins out of there. And bring somebody else in.
But there was 39,000 people in the seats last night.
And when that number drops, that's when Ed Rogers will make the move. Until it drops, but it's frustrating. You know, as a fan, it's really frustrating.
Well, I think the only thing that saves their soul right now, and you come from a time when I believe there was no wild card.
No. Right? No. But I remember when there were 8 teams in each league, and you had to finish first to get to the World Series.
You have to win the division.
Exactly.
Right? That's it.
Yeah.
And then off you go. There are 2 rounds of the playoffs, and that's it.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Like right now, they're still in the mix for that final wild card right now, which will mean they'll have to go on the road, whoever they play, and that could be difficult. But that's what they're holding their hats on right now, and I think it's not good enough. I know you can continually use the excuse year after year, we're in the toughest division in all of baseball, right? Well, it's not changing.
No.
Right? No. You were a team that competed in this very well. And I don't see anything getting better right now because right now the team is struggling. They have an unbelievable amount of injuries. And I think what's even more diminishing is the fact that their best young players that maybe even shouldn't be here, Horowitz, guys like that, they're here now. What's in the tank down the road in Buffalo? Nothing.
But they had to inject some life into the team, and I think that's what these young kids do because these veterans haven't been doing it. I mean, you look at George Springer. George's a nice guy, but he can't hit anymore.
What's happened to him?
Age. You get to 35 in that, and you start declining. But the other thing they did, too, is they brought back Kiermaier. Now, I don't know if you remember this, but late in the season last year, about 2 weeks ago, I think they were in New York, and somebody interviewed him because he was coming up for free agency at the end of the season. And he said, well, I want to stay in the American League East. I definitely want to stay in the American League East, but I only want to play where there's grass. So, in other words, he wants to play in Boston. He wants to play for the Yankees or the Orioles. He doesn't want to play in Tampa. He doesn't want to play for the Blue Jays. And they go out and they re-sign this guy after none of those other teams wanted him. Like, come on. He makes a throw last night. I don't know if you saw it. It was 20 feet up the line.
Yeah.
Like, and he's great in center field. You could put, you gave up a lot.
He was.
Yeah, but you could put Varsho in center field. Yeah. And you got to get. I mean, they gave some good players away to get Varsho, so put him in center field. And they don't steal bases. They don't run. They're doing a bit of hit and run now with IKF, which I like to see. But you look at Boston. They never used to be a team that did much. Now they're running wild on the bases.
They were.
And you got to get some athletes in there that can do those kinds of things.
I'm glad you brought up a point here about you as a longtime Blue Jay fan watching the broadcast itself. And, I feel sorry in a way, too, because, I worked at Sportsnet for over a decade. I know a lot of the people that are there. And there are some outstanding broadcasters. Dan Schulman is an outstanding broadcaster. I think you would agree.
Well,
I think Buck is it's funny. Buck is getting into a point now where he can't hold back. He's saying it as it is right now. But because of the things they have to sell in the broadcast, right?
Yeah.
Like it's real tough for the Sportsnet crew. Even when they go to the show later, like they're Rogers. They're all in the family.
Yeah.
Like it's real hard to kind of criticize or be real with your feelings, don't you think?
Absolutely. But we've been spoiled. We had Gillick, we had Anthopoulos, we We've got Dan Schulman. We had Jerry Howarth, who was amazing. But getting around to the point that you were making, when Jerry was broadcasting a game, he made the comment, and Jerry is like one of my best friends. When I started my first day at the ballpark, Jerry came over, introduced himself, said, if you need to interview anybody on the other team, you don't know who to talk to the catcher, because they can always talk and they know the game. But one time Jerry wouldn't say anything bad about a player unless he said it directly to his face. That was his the way he operated. So if he said it on the air, he would have no trouble saying it to the player. Well, one night he made the comment about Jose Reyes, and he said the Blue Jays cannot win with Jose Reyes at shortstop. Well, he gets called into Beeston's office, and Paul says to him, Jerry, it's Paul's birthday, by the way, today, and a great guy.
Well, happy birthday.
Yeah, happy birthday. So anyway, he says, Jerry, I'm not going to fire you, but you have to be careful what you say about the players. So Jerry was down on the field, and Alex Anthopoulos comes over to him, and Alex and Jerry are just wonderful friends. And Alex said to him, the reason that we're concerned about what you said about Jose is we're trying to trade him.
Oh.
And they did, and then they got Troy Tulowitzki, who was a good player but had injuries,
Well,
yeah,
and it sparked an amazing run, though, right?
Exactly.
Wasn't it amazing? It was so much fun.
Yeah.
The Jays hadn't been to the playoffs, I think, for 2 decades, and and then all of a sudden, David Price, who had been a thorn in the Blue Jays side for basically a decade, he came in there, one of the best regular season pitchers of all time, and it was just a fun time. Everyone started buying jerseys all over again. The ballpark, and I've always said this too. I know they've done all these improvements to the ballpark, and I haven't been there yet on a fan basis. I've been there from a media perspective, but. Everyone I know that's been there said, Bubs, it's way better. Like, it's way better. Yeah. The seating is better. It's more comfortable, more room, all of it.
Right.
But you would attest, back in those days when it was a bigger facility, when you put 51,000 in there, when the place was full, it was fun.
It was. And I can remember sitting in the press box and saying one night, they got 51,000 fans here, but I said, when this team starts to go south, they're not going to come out. They had such a great team. And that was Pat Gillick. I mean, the guy was a genius. He's a Hall of Fame guy. And Anthopoulos will be in the Hall of Fame one day. And you know what? Anthopoulos is a Canadian.
McMaster student.
Exactly. And he should be here. If he were here, it would be a different story that we're talking about today, I guarantee you.
Is there hope? Like, is there anyone when you look at the team that you say, I like, there's a good building block here?
Some of these young kids I really like. But, it takes time. We've seen it this year. I mean, some of these young players that have come up, and Jackson Holiday. Of course, I got him on both my fantasy teams, and he goes 2 for 34. They don't, even Willie Mays, I think he started like 1 for 21 or something like this, and he was my boyhood hero. But he actually said to the manager, put me back in the minors because I can't play here. But turned out to be great. You got to give these guys a chance to develop. So some of these young guys, they say, they were comparing Martinez last night, said, well, he could be like a Teoscar one day, or maybe even George Bell. But it takes time for these guys to develop. The guy that I really admire is Schneider, because
the babe.
Yeah. Well, and that guy plays all out. He reminds me of Pete Rose, Charlie Hustle. And Pete Rose played so hard, and I see that in Davis Snyder. He runs everything out. He's a second baseman. He goes to left field. Rose started out at second, went to third. Then they put him in left field. Put him at first base. Didn't matter where you put him. He was a player manager when I was covering baseball, and we were at spring training one year, and he came out early for batting practice before any of the other guys were on the field. And I had heard that he had actually brought a friend in from California to throw batting practice to him. But that guy should be in the Hall of Fame. That's a shame. But the next day we were in Vero Beach, and the Dodgers had brought in local business people, and they brought in Frank Robinson to talk. So Frank's up there, and question and answer, and one of the businessmen said, "What was the hardest thing you had to do when you were player manager?" And he said, "I never had time for batting practice." Oh, hold it! I just saw Pete Rose. That's what made Pete Rose great. He was I love Pete Rose. You know, that's the kind of guy you want.
Yep. Not enough of those guys, and you know, and if I may, because you've seen various decades of baseball and players.
You're aging me now.
Well, no, but I'm doing this out of respect, actually. You know, are the ball players different than what they were,
yes,
we'll say, in the 80s?
Absolutely. Oh, it's completely different. You know, back in the day, and I think Steve Garvey said this to me one day. He said, you know, players of my era, we play for the name on the front of our jersey. And today's players play for the name on the back of their jersey, play for themselves. And I don't know if this bothers you, but it bothers me when a guy slides into second base and he's out and the shortstop reaches out to pick him up off the ground. You know, back in the day, you couldn't even talk to the opponents before a game. That was called fraternizing, you know, and there was none of that. These guys, they're all union buds, you know, and it just drives me. And here's the other thing. I see your first baseman. He's out there, Guerrero, and he's talking to everybody. Well, he can't even do an interview in English. He was born in Montreal. His dad played in Montreal. His dad played in LA. What is, like, these guys, to me, he's pampered. And that bothers me, you know. Barrios can't speak English very well. He's broken English. Even if he has the worst game of his career, he answers every question after the game
he does.
In English.
He tries. It's slow, but he's
but
trying.
He does it.
He's trying.
You know, that's part of your job. And I just don't understand why Guerrero can't do that.
I think his dad told him not to. That's just my guess. Well, I really do. I really do believe, because I think I'm with you. I think Vladdy can speak English,
well, of course
no problem. But I think he chooses not to. And the only support I will give to him to that, and we've seen that in the NHL, the National Hockey League, with a lot of Russian players, is that sometimes their English is so broken that sometimes things get said the wrong way or misled the wrong way. And I think maybe he's trying to avoid that. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt.
Boy,
I think.
you really are.
I'm trying hard. I'm trying hard, right? Because I want Vladdy to be a star, right? Like, I do. I want him. I want him to be the cornerstone. I want him and Bo to be these guys that we follow for the next 10 years.
Well, I
but
totally
I don't know if it's going to happen
with you. But I just don't. I think he's pampered, and as much as I like Buck, and Buck, you know, he played, he managed, he knows everything. In his mind, you know, Vladdy can do no wrong. I mean, I saw a ball hit to him on his glove side the other day, one hop, and Vladdy and Buck said, "What a great play! What a great play!" And I'm thinking, okay, you know, like, please don't insult us, you know. And I love Buck. Buck is a really good man, really good man. But you know, they're too soft on Vladdy.
Again, I'm going to ask you one of these questions that boggles my mind. And I think the best friend of mine is, in fact, all sports, is like baseballreference.com, hockeyreference.com, football. There's some things that you can really learn statistically, and baseball is such a stat-driven sport. It annoys me. These are the little things, because again, I go back where I really started to become a baseball fan in the 80s, when the Blue Jays kind of came around, especially in 85 when they got real good.
Really?
And then you followed it through to this point. I look at a guy like Ferguson Jenkins, we'll say, and in his Cy Young year, he had 26 complete games. The Blue Jays had one complete game.
And those guys didn't have arm problems like
that's what I don't understand.
I know.
Right? Even I'll go as far and you say, Bubba, you're being an old man here. I'll even advance it. And you look at Roy Halladay and look at his numbers in his career. 300 career, 250, 275 innings pitched, I'm talking about. 250.
I know.
Now, you know, a guy like, I'm trying to remember who the starter this year for the Blue Jays, he hit the 200 inning mark, and it's like, woohoo! Woo!
Yeah.
200 innings.
Yeah, I know. It's, well, back in the day, they were talking about...
Bassett, sir.
Yeah, and they were talking about it last night. Two pitchers that went 16 innings. For both, each team, the guys went 16 innings. I think it was a scoreless game until the 16th inning, and the two pitchers that started finished the game. 16 innings.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't see. I mean, they're lucky to get 6 innings today.
Yeah.
And you talk about Fergie Jenkins. What a player, and a Canadian. 6 years in a row, he won 20 games. Fabulous player. A great credit to Canadian baseball.
Well, yeah, I mean, and they seem to not value wins nowadays as much as they did back in the day in terms of a statistical story. But yeah, I mean, the guy had a Hall of Fame career. But there's so many of those guys in that era. Who just, I mean, yeah, and their arms never fell off. And as you said, maybe these guys do get babied. It's strange. One more thing about the past when you talk about baseball, you brought him up. I was amazed to see the outpouring of affection and love for Willie Mays. And everyone kind of said the same. Wasn't the best home run hitter, wasn't the best at maybe anything, but he may have been the most complete baseball player of all time. You
Absolutely,
agree?
Totally. I couldn't agree with you more. What a credit to the game. Just an amazing athlete. I never saw him in person. I think of all the players I saw in person, maybe Robbie Alomar was the best because he could do it all. But I wish I had seen Willie Mays. I mean, I watched him all the time on TV. He was my boyhood hero, and he could do it all. And not only was he a great player, he was a great ambassador for the game. Say hey, say hey, Willie Mays. He had that gregarious personality. You go back to Jerry Howarth for a second, but he grew up in San Francisco, and one day he looked over in the car, and there was Willie driving his pink Cadillac.
Yeah.
And big smile on his face and everything. And what a gentleman, and just, sad. I mean, he had a great life, 93 years. But I wish there were more guys like Willie Mays,
I'll tell you, I mean, there's such little video of him at the time, and you kind of see the same things over and again, but how can anyone ever get fed up of that crazy over-the-shoulder catch at the Polo Grounds, which don't even exist anymore, that they say at that time was about, 500 feet?
Yeah, he could run forever. He knew he wasn't going to run into the wall.
Like, it's crazy. I was like, how could a park be center field be so big, and he actually still went and caught it?
I know.
I mean, just a spectacular play. If anyone doesn't see it again, YouTube, utilize it. Just a crazy thing. Well, I'll tell you, Fred, what are you doing now? I think that's where I have to go. What are you doing now? What's picking up your time right now?
In addition,
other than the fantasy baseball, look at you.
Well, and I had to trade Bichette this year.
Oh, you did not.
I traded, but I got Seager back, so I'm pretty happy with that trade. But I love Bo, but so I love that. I'm also doing video bios, and which is fascinating because everyone has a story, and I actually did one on my great-grandfather, and we put him on a plaque like this, right?
Oh, okay.
And then so the QR code. So I'm going to put this on my great-grandfather's tombstone, and if you scan that QR code, his video will play. So anybody that goes there, so that's what we've been doing lately, and I didn't know much about him, of course, but he owned a brewery, which I guess explains why I like beer, not wine.
Look at that.
So it was James Franklin Anderton, and like I said, everybody has a story, and you take some old VHS tape you digitize everything from the past, and with AI, you can make some pretty wonderful stories, even from the past. So
that's the good use of AI.
Exactly. But I remember when we did this, we put in James Franklin Anderton, Barry Brewer, and so I work with the people at Hills. Them they're great. So anyway, John Luff, the editor, says, let's just run it through AI and see what we come up with. He goes to the other room, gets it, brings it out, shows it to me. It's a whole page on my great-grandfather.
Wow.
It wasn't fictional, but there were some pretty good lines in there that I could use.
Spectacular.
I mean, it wasn't. it was fictional. That's what I meant to say.
Okay.
You know, it wasn't the truth. It wasn't, but they just made up this whole story with. That's all they had to work with, and it was like a whole full page full of stuff.
Wow.
So, you know, you got to be careful what you're going to use.
For sure.
You know, and there are some good things about it, but clearly there's some dangerous
How can people
things.
contact you with this? Because it's important.
Yeah.
People, this is going to make a great gift or all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, well, thank you. So it's videobio.ca, and you know, my email address is fanderton at gmail.com, and I'd be happy to talk to anyone that wants to preserve a legacy. You know, my dad was one of the nicest guys in the world. Everybody liked my dad, and I would pay anything to be able to sit down and watch a video of him talk. You know, just to see his philosophy of life. He taught Dale Carnegie the 3 C's: never criticize, condemn, or complain. I never heard my dad criticize, condemn, or complain, and he lived to be 90. But I would love to be able to sit down and be reminded of some of those things. So that's kind of what we're doing.
Quite a legacy, quite a legacy. You know, Fred, I got to say this. As I said off the top, one of the reasons I do what I do is because of you. And when Paul Hendrick was in here too, I'm going to have to repeat the same story because it's so special to me and so important to me. I came in, I was in grade 12, you know, you get those career days, right? Yeah. And I always wanted to be one of two things my whole life, an air traffic controlman or a sportscaster. And my parents did not want me to be an air traffic controlman at that time, not quite the computers and technology like we have now. And, you know, there was a high suicide rate, and they're like, don't do it. You know what you do? I love planes, though. Yeah. But sports was always at the core, you know, because of my dad. And I obviously, I think I made the right choice. But one of the reasons was I came into CHCH in the old building, which does not exist any longer, sadly in some ways. And we went to this TV station. This was a couple other people wanted to be in TV, and we got toured of the old CHCH facility, and I could care less about all the other stuff. I wanted to see the sports department, right? And going up, because you guys were in the old building, the old part of the new building at Hunter at that time, and walked up the stairs, and there were you and I'm trying to remember, like, Welchie was there, you were there, Henny was there, I think Boyle was there, Tim, younger Boyle was there, and all these stacks of tapes. And I always remember, because Henny had this, not a computer, sorry, he had a typewriter in front of him.
Yes.
Ping, 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 ping. Yeah. And I was like, and you guys were talking sports, and then you're like, hey, you know, congratulations, you know, whatever, but this is what we do, and we ask you a couple questions, and it was such a motivation for me. But what I would not know is that years later, you, out of the kindness of your heart, sent a letter to a mutual friend of ours, Steve Foxcroft, who was sitting in this seat one day ago, oddly enough, and you said, you got to get Bubba to give me a demo tape. And, you know, can you imagine me again? And I had just finished school, or I think I was just in my last year of school, and what a high it was. And you got me on that process of, you know, putting together a demo tape and out there and applying for jobs and stuff like that. So I thank you for that. Wow. It's important to me, and you have no idea. I think we talk about the pay it forward thing, and you never know when someone's in that position and someone's trying to come up, what a motivation it can be for you.
Well, I appreciate that. And you and Steve were great on cable. And I remember seeing you, and you did some great things. There was the Aldershot High School team that you were saying some pretty critical things of, and they invited you. You said, "Oh, I'll get you guys in shape." And they I think 4 or 5 of them ran at you and tried to tackle you.
The Bubba workout.
Yes, and the other thing that I remember, and I hope you bring this back, it was called Bubba's Beef. And this big slab of beef came down over your shoulder, and then you could pontificate about whatever you wanted to say. Yeah. And I think we need more of that. Yeah. I mean, that was classic. And as I said, you and Steve were community. And so many people watched that, even though it was on cable. But I remember Bubba's Beef, and I thought, this guy's got something. So, you know, I'm glad you ended up here and continue to do a wonderful job for the community.
Well, it's a special feeling, and Fred, you got a lot to do with it, and I owe a lot to people like yourself. So thank you very much. It was awesome having you here, talking about the Blue Jays.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And I appreciate your candor, your honesty, and some of the good old stories as well too. Come back again?
Oh, absolutely.
All right. Thanks,
yes,
partner.
my friend.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
That's your Sportsline Podcast for the day. And as you've just seen and heard, we love talking sports. If you do know of an athlete, team, or event to promote the Sportsline Podcast, we want to hear from you. Please hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe button. And if you do have something to say, please comment. It's important to us. For the wonderful people that make the Sportsline Podcast possible, thank you so very much. And we'll see you tomorrow.